Welcome to Understanding Islam, the Big Picture. Our topic this week is, who was Muhammad? Can I just remind you first of all about sending in your questions for the forthcoming question and answer session to the email address that's on the screen, and also you can download an article to go with this program from my website. So, who was Muhammad? Muhammad was born in the year of the elephant. This is the way in which years were known before the time of counting in sequential dates. We're pretty certain that this was the year 570. He was born in Mecca. We know that his father was called Abdullah and his mother was Amina. Now Abdullah died before he was born, and Amina died when he was still a small child. The fact that his father was called Abdullah reminds us that the name means the servant of God, and therefore there was an understanding amongst the people of that time of the existence of Allah. Muhammad was brought up by his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib. And then when he died, the most important person in his life was his uncle, Abu Talib. Abu Talib was to become the head of his clan, and it was Abu Talib who taught Muhammad the ways of being a merchant, being a member of that family in Mecca at that time. Now, Mecca was situated about halfway down the Arabian Peninsula, over to the west on the side of the Red Sea. It was a place through which the great trading routes passed between Yemen in the south and Damascus and Alexandria in the north. So it was a marketing, a trading center. And it was in this town that Muhammad grew up, and this was the profession that he learned. We're told that when he was a young man of about perhaps 12 or 13 years of age, on one of these trading journeys with Abu Talib, they were heading toward Damascus. And as they were crossing the Syrian desert, there was in that place a Christian monk, a hermit, who was living in a fairly secluded place away from the settlement of people. And he had been inspired by God to go and search for somebody special on the camel train as Muhammad was approaching. He stopped the camel train, he went through all the people, and in the end he found the young boy Muhammad. And he had a long conversation with him about all sorts of topics of wisdom and spirituality. And then he said to his uncle Abu Talib, "Take great care of this boy, because I see the sign of prophethood upon him." So this was the first time that somebody was recognizing these prophetic qualities in the young Muhammad. In the middle of Mecca, there stood a building, a simple cuboid building called the Kaaba. When Muhammad was a young man, the Arabs at that time were worshipping idols, and the Kaaba had become a great center for idol worship and also for people coming on pilgrimage. So the Bedouin of the interior of the desert would come to the Kaaba in Mecca, and they would be encouraged to leave one of their gods there, and then periodically to come and pay their respects, to worship this god, and that meant that they would come in to stock up and buy provisions in Mecca at the same time. So pilgrimage and trading went hand in hand. That raises the question, To what sort of religious family did Muhammad belong? We've already seen that his father was called Abdullah. That is, the servant of the one and only God. And so Muhammad belongs to that fairly small community amongst the Arabs of this time who were monotheists. They knew that all these various idols were worthless, they were not worthy of worship. There was only the one God, whom they called Allah, who was worthy of worship. But they were in search of knowledge. They were seekers after the truth. People of upright life and character who were in search of knowing more about God. It was in this tradition that Muhammad grew up, and it was in this trading enterprise that he earned his living and established his reputation. His reputation is summed up in a nickname that was given to him at this time, Al-Amin. Al-Amin means the trustworthy one, the person of wise counsel. There's a story told of the people of Mecca. When Muhammad was a young man, they were having to do some rebuilding work on the Kaaba. And in the wall of the Kaaba, there was a black stone that was especially respected by the people of that time. And so when it came to the decision who should replace the black stone, all the different clan heads of Mecca were vying with each other for the honor of doing this. And it would have come to bloodshed. And so they decided that they would ask Muhammad for his wise guidance. And what he did was to spread a blanket on the ground and roll the stone into the middle of it, and then he got one person from each of the principal clans to take a corner of the blanket and take a piece of the side, and then they would carry it together to the wall of the Kaaba, and then he himself rolled it finally into place. And in this way, through his wisdom, through the fact that people respected him, he prevented bloodshed. There was living in Mecca at this time a wealthy widow called Khadija. She had been left a camel trading business by her husband, but she needed a reliable manager who could go on the trading journeys for her. She asked around amongst the other merchants, and they pointed her toward the young Muhammad, who was in his early 20s at this time, and so she recruited him as her manager. She was so impressed with his character and the way that he conducted himself that after a short time she proposed marriage to him. And together they were married for the next 25 years, monogamously, until she died in the year 619. Their infant sons died when they were small, but Fatima grew to maturity, and she it was who would later marry Ali, the cousin of Muhammad. Muhammad was the kind of person who was always seeking knowledge of God. He used to go away for periods of solitude. He would go into a cave and meditate there, sometimes for days on end. It's there that we find him in the year 610, when the Quran begins to be revealed to him. After the first revelation of the Quran, he just tells some intimate members of his family and friends, and then for a couple of years or so, they keep this new message quietly between them. After this time, Muhammad is told to go and proclaim the message in the marketplace, to take the message out into the public sphere. This first group of intimate family and friends of Muhammad who became Muslims included Khadija, his wife, Ali, his cousin, Abu Bakr, and Umar, who were both later to become heads of the Muslim community. The way that the merchants of Mecca responded to the message of Muhammad was with opposition and with persecution. Muhammad was telling them that they should live upright and honorable lives. They should be fair and just in their trading. They should always give good measure. Well, no merchant wants to hear this. He was also saying that the worship of idols was meaningless and should be stopped, and everyone should worship the one God alone. Well, the merchants were afraid that that would cut off the pilgrimage trade, and therefore that would curtail their ability to sell their goods. And so opposition came to the early Muslim community, especially from the merchants. The first Muslims within the community in Mecca tended to be people without great social importance. There were women, there were young people, the second son of the family, servants, slaves, people like that. Often they would be persecuted, they would be sometimes tortured, they would be shunned by other members of the community. So bad did this persecution become that in 615 a group of this small Muslim community went off to take refuge in Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia. They went there because there was a Christian king, and Muhammad told them, "Go and tell the king that you have come from the messenger of God." When they arrived there seeking refuge, the king said to them, "Well, what's the message that this messenger of God has given you?" And so they started to recite verses of the Quran. We know in particular that they recited those verses from chapter 19 of the Quran, in which we hear about the birth of Jesus and the respect for the Virgin Mary. After he had heard these verses and had spoken with the people, he took counsel amongst his bishops and wise men, and then he stood up to make his pronouncement. He had a kingly staff in his hand and drew a line in the ground. "The difference between us Christians and you Muslims," he said, "is the thickness of that line. You shall have safety in my country for as long as you need it." Another incident that took place during these early years in Mecca was a visit from an angel to Muhammad in his bed at night. The angel bade him come out and mount upon a mysterious creature who awaited outside called al-Buraq. Together they went from Mecca to Jerusalem, and he dismounted in Jerusalem on the rock that is today covered by the Dome of the Rock, and there he met all the earlier prophets, and he led them as a congregation in prayer. Thus they recognized his prophethood. He then ascended into heaven, where he had an audience with God. This is called the Mi'raj. During this audience, he was taught practical things by God, that Muslims were to pray 5 times a day, for example, and also he was given knowledge that only God could impart. We say the knowledge of the unseen, hidden knowledge. Muhammad then returned to the earth, to the rock, and then returned to Mecca. This journey took place in a single instant of time. In other words, it was an out-of-time experience. And the tradition speaks of a pitcher of water which was tipped over as Muhammad left his bed, and the drop of water was just hitting the ground as he re-entered it. And the scholars of Islam are divided. Some say that this was a physical journey, and some that it was a spiritual journey. And this question is normally put in the form, did his body leave the bed? And as I say, there is a variety of opinion on the question. The year 619 is often spoken of as the year of sorrows. It was in this year that Muhammad lost Khadija, his wife, and also his uncle Abu Talib. Khadija had been a great support and strength to the infant Muslim community, and Abu Talib had been their protector. He had protected Muhammad from any attacks upon him and from the worst of the persecution, because by this time he was the head of the clan. Now, after he died, Muhammad lost that protection, and so he was now open to more persecution within the community, and indeed, we have the beginning of talk of assassination. Let's assassinate Muhammad. One of the instances that takes place in the next year is that Muhammad went to a nearby city called Taif, and he tried to proclaim his message there in the marketplace to see whether those people would be open to hear the message from him. He was ridiculed. The children threw stones and dirt at him. He was cut and had to flee from that city. We read that he was in a vineyard outside Taif, and the angel Gabriel came to him and said, I have been commanded by God, if you give the word, I am to destroy that city. And Muhammad replied, don't do that, because if you do, they will never have the chance to repent. And then he prayed, and he said, O God, I complain of nothing this day except my own inability adequately to convey the message. But as long as things are all right between you and me, what other people think of me doesn't matter. It was around this time that the people of Yathrib, another city about 350 kilometers north of Mecca, started coming to Mecca to hear the teaching of Muhammad. Yathrib was a city of many different communities. They were often in dispute. They felt that they needed a single strong leader who could bind them together. And so they came to listen to Muhammad and to report back with a view to possibly offering him the chance to come to Yathrib as their agreed leader. Eventually, that's what happened. And in the year 622, Muhammad started to send the Muslims from Mecca in small groups up to migrate to Medina. The city of Yathrib was to have a new name, Madinatul Nabi, or we say today just Medina. Muhammad himself also made this migration. It's called the Hijrah, and it becomes a seminal moment in the history of Islam. It is from this year that the Islamic calendar is dated. So Anno Higira, in the year of the Hijrah, and you will sometimes see this written AH. There was an assassination attempt upon the life of Muhammad in the last few days in which he was in Mecca. Muhammad heard what was going to happen, and Ali, his cousin, slept in his place so that the assassins wouldn't be able to find him. Muhammad left to make his own hijrah to Medina along with his companion Abu Bakr. God mysteriously protected them during this journey. We hear, for example, that they spent a night or possibly a few nights in a cave, and that this cave was protected by a spider spinning a web across the mouth of it, by a nesting bird appearing in front of it, so that the pursuers could not believe that anybody could possibly be inside. When the Muslims from Mecca arrived in Medina, Muhammad paired them up with the people of Medina. You see, Mecca was a trading city. They knew about trade and doing business. Medina was an agricultural city. They knew about growing things and livestock. And so one Muslim family from Medina was paired with one Muslim family from Mecca, and so they were to share their knowledge, to share their goods, and thus to establish a new life together, and also to build a strong community based on sharing knowledge and goods for the welfare and betterment of all. When they were in Mecca, the infant Muslim community used to pray behind the Kaaba, but facing in the direction of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the home of the Hebrew line of prophets. Now, when they moved to Medina, Jerusalem was in one direction and Mecca was in another. And so for the first 16 months of their time there, Muhammad orientated his community at prayer toward Jerusalem. This shows us why Jerusalem is so important to Muslims. It is sometimes spoken of as the third of the holy cities of Islam. The Quran actually uses a little Arabic device to emphasize this. It says it is the third of the two most holy cities of Islam: Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. Now, after 16 months, the congregation was at prayer, and a revelation came to the prophet, telling him to reorientate his community so that they should pray their congregational prayers in the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca. In Arabic, the direction is Qibla. So from this time onwards, the Qibla for all Muslims all over the world for their formal prayers has been toward the Kaaba in Mecca. Medina was a very mixed society. Not only were there Arabs there, but there were also Jews. Some of the Arabs were Muslims, some of them continued to follow their traditional ways. During this time, an important document was drawn up. It's called the Constitution of Medina, saying that the people shall form one single community and binding everybody together in what we would today call a mutual defense treaty. The people of Mecca were not happy that they had lost the ability to contain Muhammad and his infant Muslim community. They were afraid that he would make Medina a more important trading city than their own Mecca. And so they decided that they would march on Medina, they would kill Muhammad, and they would wipe out the infant Muslim community. During the first 5 years after the Hijrah, there were 3 principal battles between the Meccans and the people of Medina. In 624, we have the Battle of Badr. In 625, the Battle of Uhud. And in 627, the Battle of the Ditch, or the Trench. In the year 628, Muhammad had a dream that he was going to go to Mecca to make a minor pilgrimage, just a short visitation. He told his companions and said, "Who will come with me?" And so a large group made the journey together toward Mecca, and they halted at a place called Hudaybiyah. Here they were met by a delegation from Mecca who said, "You will not enter, we will not give you permission." On this occasion, Muhammad took a solemn pledge from all those who were with him that they would obey him in all things the next day. The next day, Muhammad made an agreement with the people of Mecca, in which he appeared to give way to all their demands. He would not enter Mecca on this occasion. He would not make his pilgrimage, but he would come again next year. They would make their sacrifices in the desert instead. And if any people came to flee from Mecca to join the Muslims in Medina, if they were young people without their parents' permission, he would send them back. Lots of the young Muslim community said that he's given too much ground here. He has given in to the demands of the people of Mecca. But what it meant was there was open trade and exchange of peoples between Mecca and Medina in the next couple of years, and so there was an increased number of people who converted to Islam because now they had contact with Muslims. In the year 629 there was a minor pilgrimage and it went off smoothly. But in 630 there was an incident in which someone was killed. And so Muhammad decided that this was the moment to call upon the people of Mecca to surrender to Muslim rule. They surrendered almost without bloodshed. They were expecting, of course, that there would be reprisals, but instead Muhammad said that they could take sanctuary by going to the house of one of their leaders who was one of the great enemies of Muhammad, and if they went there for sanctuary, they would be forgiven. The first act of Muhammad in the Muslim city of Mecca was to cleanse the Kaaba, to smash all the idols and have the walls scrubbed clean. There was to be no more idol worship in this city. The next year, in 631, there was a Christian delegation from Najran, a settlement further south toward modern-day Yemen, and they came to visit Muhammad in Medina to make an agreement with him. They came with their princes and their judges and their bishops, and there was a long discussion about the person of Jesus, and they disagreed about the person of Jesus. Nevertheless, Muhammad allowed them to pray in his mosque in Medina, and when they left, they asked that Muhammad would appoint a wise man to go with them to be an arbiter in any disputes that they could not settle. Muhammad died in 632, just a few months after he had made the Hajj, the great pilgrimage to Mecca, the only time that he was able to make that pilgrimage himself. He died in Medina, and he was buried where he died, and over the centuries his burial place has been turned into a tomb of great beauty and reverence, and it has been incorporated into the Prophet's mosque, the Masjid al-Nabi. Join me next week when we come to look at the question, what is the Quran?